sounds like we are just jumping in live. Chris Botelho is in game number 3 with this Azorius control deck up against Connor. Wrong Connor. That is Connor Mackenzie. But, all right, what do we got here? We got a Biza. We got some fish. And it is Connor's turn. Jim, how does this look?
Lot to come into,
Yeah.
Pretty gummed up board where no player is clearly ahead. Cutter, obviously, what Connor wants to have in play. Beza, obviously, what Chris wants to have in play as far as a stabilizing agent. Can't see cards in hand for Chris, which I think is a really, really important number.
Ooh, okay.
And we're seeing here, this is kind of a different version of the Izzet deck from Connor. This is the more bouncy version. So you have this town, Thunder Trap Trainer, little card advantage. So Connor's not really afraid to play a longer game.
Yeah. Connor, really awesome player. I went and gave him a congratulations. And he's like, hey, thanks, man. Do you remember playing against me at GP Portland? And I was like, I'm sorry. I have a bad memory. He's like, that was my first GP. You destroyed me in a Teamer Energy Mirror. And it was a lot of fun. And it said it maybe ignited the fire a bit. And now here he is, crushing.
I was hoping that story was going to go to, and I've wanted revenge ever since.
Yes.
I will play you again, and I will beat you. Get out of the booth, get into the game so I can crush you.
Exactly. I think he's going to try to take that aggression out on Chris Botelho instead. But as it stands here, Connor just bounced, got some value here, didn't have any good attacks into the Biza, and the game goes back to Chris. As long as Chris has a solid amount of cards in hand, you got to think this is the kind of game that Chris is okay with here. River Regent coming down to do some bouncing. Looks like just killing otters, killing monks.
Yeah, and this is what happens a lot in these post-board games where the games become less smooth draw-go games and more, all right, this game's getting scrappy.
Yeah.
Let's just jam, and not usual to see the control deck on the offensive here. When you have a 12 power in play, a huge flyer, it's very, very hard for Connor to remove. And also, Connor is playing this Thunder Trap Trainer, a little more of a card advantage game. So that can be exploitable by just attacking.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And, one surefire way to know that Chris is ahead, the red zone. If Chris is attacking, Chris is probably ahead. So I would lead me to believe those 2 cards, maybe 3 cards in Chris's hand, are still pretty strong. So Connor is definitely up against it here.
Could be the inverse, too, honestly, where they could actually not be that strong. And Chris says, you know what? I want to put power in play now and try and end this game. Because I think if this town loops keep going on and so on and so forth, it's going to be a struggle with the cards that I currently have. But
sure.
It could be either or. One important thing to note here is the Restless Anchorage that Chris also has. So there's 8 power in the air. Of course, Connor's at 16. That's a lot. That's 2-turn clock.
2-turn clock.
Kind of out of nowhere.
So Chris entering the red zone means nothing except a 4-5 is coming to attack.
4 damage is getting through.
Exactly. So we've been stocking up here from Connor. We got one more spell here to trigger the Corey Steel Cutter. But that being said, still not going to be great attacks unless you get the River Regent out of the way. But man, that doesn't feel good either if you're into the flood mining that and then you get your tokens bounced again.
Yeah, one of the weaknesses of this Izzet deck we've seen all tournament is these large toughness creatures, especially with ETBs. But just in general, that the Flood Maw is a great answer to a lot of the problems that kind of vex the Izzet deck. But, it is a temporary answer. Now, to be fair, Connor's deck does have this town ain't big enough. So there are these, there are more bounce spells as well as possible like kind of bounce loops, which can be good against the bigger creatures. But that's the kind of long game Chris wants to play anyway.
Really good against the bigger creatures that don't have a lot of ETB effects. That can be a problem. So from that sleight of hand, I think I got a quick glimpse at the Rage. Monstrous Rage, I think, was one of the cards. We'll see if it was picked up. This attack definitely signifies that that's probably the case, as that Swift Spear is a 3-4 right now. This Monk should be a 2-2. So I guess Swift Spear or the Monk with Monstrous Rage would not be able to kill the Regent, but Rage plus Opt or something would.
And I kind of like this, honestly.
Is that a Rebel Salvo?
Rebel Salvo. Affinity for equipment. There's one of those in play.
Very, very common thing. Affinity, meh. The ability of affinity for artifact or for equipments though. Now that's what I'm talking about. All right, Rebel Salvo able to clean up a creature. So that leads me to believe, was the plan to deal with this river region just a monk getting in there and then Rebel Salvoing it?
I mean, when you have the ability to make more monks, you know, it's an answer. I think that must be answered.
So that fish got in there for no reason, you know, air quotes, no reason. So I'm sure there's a reason for it.
Lock it up.
Lock down. So these are the spots when you're playing blue-white control. If you can lock down and you have a piece of counter magic as a backup, and then why not if you throw authority on top of all that, that's the games where you just lock it up. So, I mean, if there's a negate, change the equation in hand for Chris or whatever, sign the slip.
Yeah, and even without that, the authority goes a long way in that regard. You know, 1-2 punch, you know, and again, the answer to lockdown is not disenchant. So Connor has to go for it, bounce the lockdown, gets one big shot until Chris can just cast it again.
All right, could be the last couple turns here of Connor Mackenzie's tournament. Not lethal yet here from Chris Botelho on the other side with the Restless Anchorage, but we are getting very, very close to getting that way. And you know, I've seen Connor do it plenty of times in the feature match. Let's tap 3 and stock up and figure it out.
Pretty deliberate here. It's interesting. You know, if you have a stock up and you're kind of at this stage in the game, you gotta start somewhere, you know?
Whoa, and negate to take down the stock up. Chris Botelho didn't even wait for maybe a way to bounce the lockdown. Is that an aggressive negate there, or does that feel reasonable?
It is reasonably aggressive. I think that's predicated on
You can't say both. I was like, is it reasonable or aggressive? You're like, that's reasonably aggressive.
I answered the question.
Come on.
Sort of. I think that's predicated on the authority of the consoles, you know, where authority provides a decent amount of insurance against the lockdown being bounced. It's hard to get one big burst of damage in through the authority, and then, of course, Chris can redeploy the temporary lockdown.
All right.
So Chris is saying that, you know, your hand is bad enough where I'm happy to make this exchange right now. 2-turn clock in play. The 2-for-1 and the quality of the cards of stock up maybe have to overcome, but I don't think you have it yet, and I don't think one Flood Maw is enough.
Does look like Connor has a lot of cards, though. And when you have 5-6 cards, a stock up when your back's up against it maybe is not that scary. But, yeah, it does look like we only have 3 cards. So here is an Otter. 2 more cards. The Otter comes in sideways.
I think the fact that Connor started on stock up,
you
know, is a pretty big telling of I don't really have an answer.
I mean, it could be bait, too. You know, like,
sure,
that is for sure an option as well. But
are you implying,
I'm with you.
Are you implying that I took the bait?
I am, yes.
Counter that. Let's go. You got nothing.
Exactly. Hook, line, and sinker. That last card's into the Flood Maw. And even if it is, I don't know. If the last card's into the Flood Maw from Connor and Chris doesn't have another negate, no more lies, anything like that, is Connor even in a good spot?
I can't imagine it's not a counterspell with this Anchorage attack.
Okay, that is into the Flood Maw. It bounced the River Regent. Okay. Now, I mean, hey, you can't just recast that right now. You get to sack this map. And this Storm Chaser's talent can level up. You can get a 2-drop. I don't see any ways to counter the River Regent from doing damage when it comes back. What do you get? Because we're hellbent from Connor, so that's the play, you know?
Man, I mean, Chris has left. I mean, it's not total shields down with the authority in play, but
do you just get another into the Flood Maw and just keep bouncing things? Like, the problem is you're bouncing a River Regents that's double destroying your creatures, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty tough, you know. And again, the setup on bouncing lockdown requires a lot of setup. You have to end step it. There's the authority in play.
I mean, we're probably stock up now when you draw land 7, huh?
For sure.
Yeah. I've only watched like 3 games of Connor Mackenzie in the feature match area, but I think he's cast 15 stock ups. Okay, he did pull up this town or stock up. I mean, this town, when you can get authority and temporary lockdown, is a heck of a thing to do. You pay 5,
It's tough, though, because against the deck playing counter spells, tapping 5 is a huge commitment.
Yeah, that's true. Here's a stock up.
Yeah, this is pretty good.
This is fine. Yeah, these 2 otters are going to get in, put Chris down to 10. And then with Connor being at 8, the turn feels pretty scripted to me, where you're just playing River Regent, saying go, maybe having 1 or 2 mana available. But that play is just very good.
Yeah. Double Chupacabra. And then Authority. Authority's looking really good here, kind of stopping that. Or not stopping, but stymieing that big potential of burst damage.
Yeah. Also, shouldn't there be a counter on the Restless Anchorage? I believe the No More Lies was put to the yard.
No, it was a land. It was a Scryland or Surveilled.
Oh, okay.
And then the No More Lies was Surveilled.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Not the case. Here comes a couple of the otters. Puts Chris down to 10. And let's see. River Regent sending these otters to the Shadow Realm, I assume.
That's a big dragon.
Okay, is there another land? There is, but it's tapped, so almost assuredly no interaction. Chris Botelho's list does play a couple of Elspeth Smites, so you might have those. But this feels like the turn for Connor. You have 6 power in the air. You got 2 more power in your land spot. So this is well and truly do or die territory.
Yeah, and with Authority mucking things up here, this is going to be a tall hill to climb.
So do you do the same? Do you just level up Storm Chaser's talent to 2, get this town, wait to see if Chris Botelho makes the same play of animating the land, and then just bounce River Regent and one of your talents again? Like,
having the option,
I don't know what it's like accomplishing, but that's an option, right?
Having the option there is pretty cool because you can deter for a turn, but even if you don't bounce, you could threaten to bounce something else. You still take 6.
Yeah.
You're still 2, and then you still have 2 lethal attackers next turn. So it is a lot of wheel spinning for this towns in a spot where we need to build a rocket ship.
Yep. All right, so Opt kept it. I mean, that's got to lead me to believe that Connor is not dead right now. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend keeping the card. All right, here's a level 2. No interaction from Chris, no get lost or something to be able to work it. And it looks like here is this town. So it looks like to me, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, this is I have it this town, and now Connor has the choice to make. Do I bounce it right now so I for sure don't die next turn, or do I wait till you animate the Restless Anchorage, get a little greedy, and all right, this question's been answered immediately?
Yeah, there's definitely some value to waiting.
I think I would have waited there, and I would have just lost to a negate and been okay with it.
Right.
Because I think you lose to negate anyways would be where my mindset was at. And if I can make it to a spot where I can make it so Chris, doesn't have lethal on the battlefield ready to go for another turn, similar to what he did 2 turns ago, that's how I feel like I maybe could squeak this game out. But instead, the River Regent bounces nothing. And we send it back Connor's way.
And now just kind of
same thing.
In a similar spot, yeah.
And now, now the thing is, Connor can do this again, but now the 2 mana is available. So now I think Connor is forced into I'm going to wait until you animate because you could have the negate right now and I die anyways. Might as well go for it, right?
Kind of a funny stalemate loop, where just like Connor can just keep doing this over and over again, but Chris is not in stalemate. Chris is just going to keep drawing cards and making land drops and playing other things, drawing counter spells and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's a stalemate in the sense that Connor can keep doing this, but if Chris can ever break up the cycle, then it's GG. So an opt, that does make it so the only play available that we know face up is Storm Chaser's talent, level it up, get into the Flood Maw, survive that way. Or you could play land 8 and still do the this town shenanigans.
What a squeeze.
What a squeeze indeed. Talent, Sideways Otter. Chris to 11. And here it is. If this is a level 2, if Chris says I respond with a get lost, the game would be over. It's not the case. Into the Flood Maw to the hand. And now does Connor wait till that creature line gets animated, or you go for it now. I don't think there's a reason to go for it now. Wouldn't you agree?
That's a draw step, but I agree. I think you just gotta wait. And this is just, you can see it on Connor's face here. It's just a really, between a rock and a hard place,
Between a fish and an otter. Untapped. You could do it at upkeep to prevent the draw step. Doesn't seem the case. Chris is moving fast. Chris is aware of this line. This leads me to believe that this attack is going to get this. Chris is going to meet this with a counter spell. No more lies. And Chris Botelho takes it down. Huge sigh, a huge shake. Chris advances to the top 4. Condolences to Connor Mackenzie. But you know what? Chris has been playing Azorius Control this entire weekend and has been beating Izzet decks left and right. So when you build a deck and you prepare it for the best matchup and you keep playing it, that's just good deck building.